The issue at the center of this entire situation is not noise, rumors, or exaggerated internet chatter. It is not about what fans think they saw or what social media decided to turn into a headline for clicks. At its core, this moment is about patterns in behavior, patterns in storytelling, and patterns in what gets shown versus what quietly disappears. Because when footage is removed, when explanations begin to shift, and when accountability feels carefully edited out of the narrative, it forces viewers to pause and ask one question that changes everything: why? And once that question enters the conversation, it no longer stays contained to one scene or one episode. It spreads across seasons, decisions, and outcomes, forcing a deeper examination of what has been happening all along. This was never about one comment or one uncomfortable exchange. It was about what that missing moment revealed and why it mattered enough to be removed in the first place. Reality television thrives on conflict, so when conflict suddenly vanishes, it raises suspicion. Viewers are accustomed to drama being amplified, not erased, so when something critical is cut, the absence speaks louder than the footage ever could. The silence becomes the story, and that silence is what has driven this entire discussion forward. Martell has spent years presenting himself as a confident builder, a man with vision, ambition, and unwavering belief in his ideas. On screen, that image has been reinforced season after season. He is shown as someone who believes in big homes, big developments, and big results. The language is always optimistic, the framing is always hopeful, but when you step back and stop listening to the promises and instead begin examining the outcomes, the picture becomes far more complicated. Homes built to impress remain unsold. Projects introduced with excitement quietly stall or disappear without updates. And rather than receiving direct explanations, viewers are often given revised narratives that sound polished but leave too many unanswered questions. One of the most pivotal moments in this entire situation centered on something surprisingly simple, a question about an investment property. It wasn't an accusation, it wasn't personal, it wasn't an attempt to embarrass anyone. It was a straightforward, practical question about why a property had not sold or rented as expected. That single question cracked open a storyline that had been carefully curated for years. According to extended chatter and reports from individuals who claim knowledge of what was said during that exchange, the truth was uncomfortable. The home didn't move because the market didn't respond. There was no strategic win. There was no master plan unfolding behind the scenes. Instead, the property reportedly became a last option living arrangement rather than a successful investment outcome. From a business standpoint, that distinction matters. When a plan fails, acknowledging that failure is part of growth. Adjusting strategy is part of progress. But repeating the same approach without results is not confidence, it's denial. Huntsville is not overflowing with buyers eager to spend millions on luxury homes, and that reality has been visible for quite some time. Yet the same blueprint continues to be used again and again, even when past results clearly show it does not deliver the promised outcome. That is why this moment struck such a nerve. It exposed a recurring issue rather than an isolated setback. The deleted exchange reportedly showed someone asking questions about timelines, decisions, and results. Those questions weren't unfair, they weren't malicious, they were the kinds of questions any serious investor or business partner would ask. But instead of allowing viewers to see that conversation unfold, it was removed. And when critical context is cut, it doesn't protect the audience, it protects an image. Once that becomes obvious, trust begins to erode, slowly at first, and then all at once. Selective editing has the power to reshape reality. It can turn repeated failures into misunderstood ambition. It can soften criticism until it becomes background noise. Over time, however, that kind of editing becomes noticeable. Viewers are not passive consumers anymore. They remember what was said in previous seasons. They notice when goals quietly change. They notice when explanations shift. And they notice when difficult conversations never make it to air. When those patterns repeat, skepticism grows. There have also been long-standing whispers about licenses, stalled developments, and projects that are announced with excitement only to quietly fade away. No follow-ups, no updates, just silence. When success is real, it usually speaks for itself. Progress leaves a trail. But when things are exaggerated, silence often follows. That silence has become increasingly loud as audiences grow more critical and less willing to accept surface-level storytelling. Reality television has completely changed how reality television is consumed. Viewers are no longer limited to what airs on screen. They revisit old episodes, they compare clips, they analyze timelines, they connect dots across seasons. When something doesn't add up, they talk about it, and when footage disappears, it doesn't stop the conversation, it amplifies it. Instead of shutting down speculation, it fuels it. The more viewers feel information is being withheld, the louder the discussion becomes.
At that point, the conversation shifts from gossip to trust. Are viewers being informed or are they being managed? That distinction matters more than ever. Once people believe they are only seeing what benefits certain cast members, every storyline becomes questionable. Every success feels staged. Every excuse is weighed against memory. And once trust is lost, rebuilding it becomes extremely difficult. While this debate was unfolding on screen, another storyline was developing outside of television, and it did so without editing, without filters, and without production shaping the narrative. Melody's sold-out event became a moment that spoke for itself. The crowd was real, the response was real, the energy was real, and that mattered. It showed that success doesn't always need a television platform to exist. That event wasn't just a personal win, it was a contrast. On one side, there was a storyline filled with missing footage, unanswered questions, and repeated explanations. On the other side, there was visible influence and reach that existed independently. It reminded people that relevance doesn't always come from drama. Sometimes it comes from consistency, authenticity, and genuine connection. That moment quietly shifted the power dynamic in public perception. It challenged the idea that certain individuals need the show more than the show needs them. Melody's ability to draw a crowd without relying on edited storylines sent a strong message. It suggested that authenticity can still win in a space dominated by manufactured moments. It reinforced the idea that real engagement doesn't require approval from producers or validation from television narratives. It exists on its own. At the same time, Carlos King's commentary added another layer to the discussion. His criticism of reality stars who quit or avoid conflict was sharp and direct. He questioned commitment and accountability, challenging whether people truly want the platform or simply the benefits that come with it. His comments sparked a broader conversation about responsibility in reality television. However, they also raised questions about fairness. If accountability is required, should it apply equally? Should some cast members be shielded from criticism through editing while others face maximum exposure? These are not small questions. They go to the heart of how reality television is produced and consumed. When editing decisions consistently favor certain narratives, imbalance is created. Viewers begin to feel manipulated rather than entertained. They notice when criticism is softened or removed. They notice when failures are reframed as vision. They notice when some voices are amplified while others are muted. That imbalance feeds online discussion and deepens skepticism. Forums fill with theories, clips circulate, old footage is re-examined. Every new detail becomes part of a larger puzzle, and with each new revelation, viewers grow more convinced that what they're seeing on television is incomplete. The hunger for transparency grows, and frustration follows. What makes this moment different from previous seasons is awareness. The audience is more informed, more vocal, and less willing to accept easy narratives. They want receipts, not rehearsed explanations. They want consistency, not revision. They want honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Martell's continued pursuit of the same high-end building strategy sits at the center of this debate. Supporters call it vision, critics call it ego. The truth likely exists somewhere in between, but without clear results, confidence begins to resemble stubbornness. Reports of lavish spending on furnishings, appliances, and landscaping only add to the confusion. High costs without visible returns naturally raise questions. When investment decisions appear driven more by appearance than outcome, priorities are questioned. Is the goal profit or is it performance? Chris's criticism, when it surfaced, resonated because it reflected what many viewers were already thinking. It wasn't personal, it was observational. It highlighted the growing gap between ambition and reality, and that gap is where much of the frustration lives. Production's role in shaping this narrative cannot be ignored. Editing choices influence perception. When context is removed, meaning changes. When patterns are hidden, accountability disappears. And when that happens repeatedly, audiences feel underestimated. Meanwhile, Melody's continued growth outside the show reinforces the idea that not all success needs to be framed by television. Her event served as a reminder that real engagement exists independently of edited storylines. All of these threads come together into a larger conversation about authenticity. Reality television walks a fine line between entertainment and truth. When that line is crossed too often, trust breaks down, and once viewers feel misled, every future storyline is viewed through a lens of skepticism. This isn't about choosing sides, it's about recognizing patterns. Repeated mistakes without reflection lead to doubt. Image management without transparency leads to backlash, and underestimating the audience leads to loss of credibility. The missing footage is important not because of what it showed, but because of what it represented, a moment where the narrative could have shifted toward honesty. Instead, it was removed, and in that absence, questions grew louder. As the dust settles, one thing becomes clear. What is hidden often says more than what is shown. Unsold homes, stalled projects, edited conversations, and shifting explanations form a pattern that cannot be ignored. At the same time, independent success stories highlight what authenticity looks like when it is not filtered.
However, when this case first surfaced, it wasn't small, it wasn't minor. The original allegations involved revenge porn, a charge that carries serious weight, especially in Alabama. The accusation was that Martell allegedly sent an explicit image to Melody and threatened to release it publicly. That kind of allegation isn't just about harassment. It crosses into intimidation, coercion, and control. In many cases, it becomes directly tied to domestic violence statutes because it involves power, fear, and psychological harm. So when this story first hit the blogs, it sent shockwaves through the fan base. People weren't just gossiping, they were genuinely disturbed. For a lot of viewers, this felt like confirmation of something they had been noticing for years. Martell's behavior didn't feel isolated anymore. It felt like escalation. Fans had already been calling him controlling, manipulative, and emotionally aggressive long before this case ever came to light. So when the revenge porn allegations surfaced, it felt like the moment where everything finally crossed a line that couldn't be explained away by editing, misunderstandings, or relationship drama. It looked like a complete collapse of the image Martell had worked so hard to build. That's why this plea deal is raising so many eyebrows. Instead of facing the original charge tied to revenge porn and domestic violence implications, Martell is now reportedly admitting guilt to harassing communication, which includes repeated unwanted texts, calls, or contact. He's also pleading guilty to non-domestic harassing communication. That distinction is not small, it's everything. Because once the domestic violence component is removed, the legal consequences become far less severe. The weight of the case dramatically decreases. Instead of facing potential jail time or months behind bars, Martell is reportedly agreeing to pay around $300 in fines, a $100 bail bond, plus court costs. On top of that, he's waiving his right to appeal. In legal terms, that reads like someone trying to close the case as quickly and quietly as possible. It's almost as if he's saying, "I'll admit to this much, pay the money, and let's move on." And that's where people start to feel uncomfortable. Because, let's be honest, when you compare the seriousness of the original allegations to the outcome of this plea, it feels disproportionate. A few $100s for a man who was once accused of something that could have ruined lives feels like a slap on the wrist. It raises questions not just about Martell, but about the system itself, about how often men accused of harassment or coercive behavior are able to minimize consequences, while women are left to deal with the emotional aftermath. Now, this case doesn't exist in isolation. It connects directly to the larger Love Marriage Huntsville universe. Melody, Marsaw Scott, Letitia Scott, Kimmy Scott, Maurice Scott, Stormy Steele, Destiny Payton, all of them are impacted by Martell's actions in one way or another. His choices have shaped storylines, alliances, and tensions across seasons. So when something this serious happens, it doesn't just affect him, it shifts the entire dynamic of the show. Think back to when this first broke. Martell was already in the middle of a heated custody battle with Melody. Their co-parenting relationship was strained, public, and emotionally charged. Fans were already side-eyeing his behavior, calling out moments that felt controlling or manipulative. Social media was dragging him daily. So when the revenge porn allegations surfaced, it felt like the final blow to his carefully curated image. This is the same man who once presented himself as the ultimate family man, the builder, the businessman, the husband who loved to position himself as superior to others. The same Martell who took jabs at Marsaw and Letitia Scott over their marital struggles, acting as though his own household was untouchable. And suddenly, here he was, facing a charge that could have landed him behind bars. The contrast was shocking. Now, with this plea deal, it feels like Martell is choosing the path of least resistance. Admit to harassment, avoid anything tied to revenge porn, pay some money, waive the appeal, and try to quietly move on. It almost feels strategic, like an attempt to minimize damage rather than take full responsibility. But the question fans keep asking is simple. Can you really move on from something like this? Because even if the punishment is light, the stigma doesn't disappear. People remember, the internet remembers, and more importantly, Melody remembers. When it comes to custody of their children, this guilty plea doesn't just vanish. It becomes part of the record. It becomes part of the argument. And that's where this case becomes even more significant. For months, this criminal case kept getting delayed. Every time it was supposed to move forward, it was pushed back. And because of that, Melody's custody case was also affected. Fans noticed the pattern. It looked like the criminal case was being dragged out so that custody decisions couldn't fully move forward. Many people felt like Martell was playing games with the system, using delays as a way to buy time and avoid accountability on multiple fronts.
That frustration was loud online. People felt like the system was being manipulated. But now, with this guilty plea, the dynamic changes. Melody can now point to an actual admission of guilt for harassment in her custody battle. That matters. It gives her concrete evidence to argue that his behavior has been unhealthy, destabilizing, and potentially harmful to the children's environment. And while all of this is happening, Melody's life looks very different. While Martell is trying to close this chapter and protect his peace, Melody is moving forward. She's focused on her businesses, she's building her brand, she's creating music, she's growing her TikTok platform, and most importantly, she's prioritizing her children. Fans are genuinely happy to see her thriving, because for a long time it felt like she was carrying the emotional weight of both the marriage and its aftermath. If Melody weren't in this strong mental and emotional space, this plea deal might have hit much harder. But right now, she's grounded. She's surrounded by her village, including Mama Van, and she's focused on the future. She's not letting Martell's legal maneuvering derail her progress. That strength is part of why so many fans support her so fiercely. But let's not pretend this isn't triggering.
For many women, cases like this are painful reminders of how often the system minimizes harassment. Women who come forward are questioned relentlessly. Were you dating him? Did you encourage him? Why didn't you block him? Why didn't you leave sooner? Instead of focusing on the man's behavior, the spotlight often shifts to the woman, as if she's responsible for managing someone else's toxicity. That's why so many people are calling this plea deal a slap on the wrist. It's not just about Martell, it's about what this outcome communicates to women everywhere who experience harassment and control. It reinforces the idea that men can push boundaries, intimidate and harass, and still walk away with minimal consequences. And when you look back at Martell's history on the show, the red flags were always there. Even his co-stars have pointed them out. Kimmy Scott and Maurice Scott have openly discussed moments where Martell's ego and pride got in the way. Marcel Scott, despite his own controversies, has thrown shade that reminds viewers Martell isn't nearly as perfect as he once claimed. The men on this show love to argue, but Martell's behavior consistently stands out as more extreme. Now let's talk about the future of the show, because there's no way this doesn't come up. Even if production tries to downplay it, fans will demand answers. Stormy Steele is not someone who stays quiet. Destiny Payton has her own history of clashing with Martell. If this plea deal becomes part of the storyline, the tension could be explosive. Martell might want to close the chapter, but reality television never forgets. Clips resurface, conversations get replayed, and viewers connect dots. And here's the final piece that really has fans talking. Martell seems to believe that waiving his right to appeal makes him look like the bigger man, calm, reflective, ready to move on. But to many people, it doesn't come across that way. Instead, it looks like someone doing whatever it takes to avoid deeper scrutiny and harsher consequences. Because when you think about what he was originally facing, a few $100s feels like nothing. Reality television thrives on drama, but it survives on trust. When viewers feel respected, they stay engaged. When they feel managed, they push back. And that pushback is what we're witnessing now. The questions are unavoidable. Are these building choices bold vision or repeated missteps? Was cutting that footage a protective move or a costly mistake? Does Melody's success prove independence, or is it an exception? There are no easy answers, but one thing is certain. The audience is watching more closely than ever. They are thinking critically, remembering past outcomes, and refusing to accept half the story. And those who assume viewers won't notice patterns are mistaken. People remember, people compare, and people talk. In the end, success, failure, authenticity, and image are tightly connected. When one is exaggerated, the others suffer. And when transparency is sacrificed, credibility follows. This moment is not just about one person or one scene. It is about the future of storytelling and whether audiences will continue to trust what they are shown. The conversation is far from over. What matters now is not what gets edited out, but what can no longer be ignored.